Today on the Ask BP podcast, we're going to talk about screening tenants in lower end rentals.
You're listening to another Bigger Pockets Ask BP podcast, where you'll hear short, direct answers to your biggest real estate questions. Submit your question today on Facebook, Twitter, or the Bigger Pockets forums by using hashtag AskBP. And don't forget to pick up your copy of the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing and other great content when you sign up for your free account at biggerpockets.com. With that, let's get to the show.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Brandon here with the Ask BP podcast. Excited that you're coming to join me for another episode today. Today, we're actually going to be talking about screening tenants. So Leanne from Manville, Texas asked, when screening tenants for lower end rental properties, where rents are $600 to $700 per month, are the standards the same? If they are, will I be able to find renters? I think this is a really good question because, a lot of times people come on Bigger Pockets or you talk to an investor and they talk about these super high standards they have for their tenants. Perhaps, I need you to have a 750 credit score and never have any problems at all with that, never have a background of anything issue. You need to make $100,000 a year. All my tenants are good quality people. That's great if you have that. However, that's not what I do. So most of my tenants are actually lower income. My average rent right now on my properties is right around $500 to $600 a month. And so I'm not getting super high end quality tenants that have six-figure jobs. I'm not in the terrible part of town. I'm not dealing with, violence and gangs and things like that. But I'm definitely low, like blue collar neighborhood. And so what do I do to be able to handle that? Let me just give you a few ideas of how I manage that in my business. First of all, there's a funny quote. A good friend of mine in high school used to always just kind of to say, if you can't reach your goals, lower your standards, right? Like that was kind of his funny line he said all the time. But it's kind of ridiculous, right? But people do that. They say, oh, I want to get this kind of, tenant, or I want to achieve this, but I can't. Therefore, I'm going to lower my standards. Should you do that? I actually don't think so. However, a lot of the goals that I set or standards that I set for my tenants that I want them to achieve, I set them knowing the kind of tenant that I'm going to get. In other words, I'm not going to set a minimum credit score of 750 or 720 in order to rent one of my properties. If I lived in a high-end area of where that was possible, I might set that. So in a way, yes, I do want to lower some of my criteria just a little bit because I know the audience. That said, I'm not going to lower it to a point of danger. And what I mean by that is right now we ask for 600 credit scores. When we do a credit score, we want to see at least 600. And if they don't have that, that puts them in dangerous category in my mind. And the reason I kind of chose that number is because that's just about what banks will allow for a mortgage. And if it's good enough for a bank, it's good enough probably for me. If they're at a 450, 500, 525, I got to get worried that they're not paying their bills. But I understand people if they're just starting out or if they had a couple credit card issues or they had medical history. I understand that things could affect a little bit. So we have a 600 credit score. We set that across all our properties, whether it's our nicer ones or our lower end. And I'm not going to lower that standard. And so I set that because I knew that was the kind of property that I'm running. At the same time, so we have that as a standard. We have no eviction. We don't allow evictions. If they have an eviction on the record, we don't rent to them. I don't lower that standard no matter what. I don't care how low end of a property I have. I'm not going to do that. I would rather drop the price considerably on my property rather than rent to somebody who had an eviction. Let me tell you a story why. We just got finished with an eviction. We haven't done a whole lot of them in my business. I think 5 or 6 or something like that over the last decade. But we just got finished with one, and the tenant, we put her and her fiance or boyfriend or whatever back 5 years ago. And back then we didn't have as strict of standards. I didn't really I hadn't lived as much of experience, right? I didn't have enough of this landlording thing. So they had an eviction on their record, and we were like, I felt bad for them. They seemed like nice people. And so what we did is we required a double security deposit. Now, sometimes when I lower standards or I fudge it a little bit, I'll require a double security deposit. I don't do it anymore on evictions because of this situation. Exactly. So 5 years later, they've rented for 5 years and they've been okay tenants during that time. They've been, messy and they've whatever else. But anyway, 5 years later now, they stopped paying rent. The couple separated, and the woman was left alone in the property with 5 kids. Sad situation, but she just stopped answering phone calls, shut down, wouldn't answer the door, nothing like that, and we had to evict. In the process, when we finally got the property back, it took about a month to get back. So we lost about a month of rent. We got into the property, and it was the absolute worst thing I have ever seen. I mean, I've been around for a while. I've never seen a property that was in this bad a condition. I mean, to be honest, like, I don't know how people lived in this situation. Like, I don't know how her and her kids lived there. I mean, the fridge had food in there that had been rotting for months and months, maybe even years. I mean, like, the carpet was just black with junk and grime. There was clearly no cleaning had ever been done on that unit, at least in many, many, many months. I mean, it was really bad. And again, I don't know what she was going through in her life, but it was a mess. Anyway, at the end of the day, we're going to be out about $5,000 on that rental unit to get it turned back over again. And great, I required a double security deposit up front. That got me an extra $500. So instead of a $500 security deposit, I have a whole whopping $1,000 to cover that. Total cost, again, about $5,000 that I lost on that property. So lesson learned, I will not compromise on the eviction part. Again, credit I might have a little bit lower, like a 600. Eviction I do not. Landlord references, I will not. Generally, I will not lower my standards. Now that said, when I go and talk to a previous landlord, I understand that these are people. These are not like numbers and facts. These are people. And so I take what they say with a grain of salt. Now that says I don't want to put emotion to it. If they say the tenant didn't pay rent, okay, then I'm not going to rent to that tenant. I'm going to trust that. But if they say something like, yeah, I didn't really like that person very much, they were just kind of rude, I'm going to understand that there's some people issues there, and I might look past that. I'm going to take it into account, but I'm not saying I won't rent to them. But what I look for that previous landlord, I'm going to look for, did they pay their rent on time? Did you have to file eviction on them? Would you rent to them again? And so those are the questions I want to ask. And again, I'm not going to fluctuate on that. I'd rather lower my rent than accept somebody for subpar standards. Let's see, what other things do I look for? There's I want them to have a job, obviously, good income. The easiest way for me to do the income thing is we just say flat out, you must have 3 times the monthly rent. You must earn 3 times the monthly rent. And the nice thing about that is it's scalable for whatever. So you could have a $1,000 a month rental. You could have a $500 a month rental. You could have a $5,000 a month rental. And that 3 times the monthly rent, you could probably apply it. Now, as you get much larger, maybe that doesn't make as much sense. Like, I don't know, maybe it does actually. I mean, it's actually a pretty common number that mortgage companies use as well, around that 33% or whatever number. I find it extremely helpful with that. The only time I will ever require more than 3 times is on the very low income ones. For example, I have a studio that might rent for $400 a month. Well, I don't think $1,200 a month is probably enough to survive in a studio. If somebody's got a car payment and somebody's got whatever else, then that might not be enough. But typically 3 times the monthly rental I'll go for, and I'm not going to lower that standard. I'm not going to accept 2 times the monthly rent. Because again, what good is it to get a tenant in there if you're going to have to evict them, or they're going to have to trash the place, or they're going to leave? So I want good tenants. So let's kind of wrap this all up together. So no, I do not lower my standards, but I might lower the rent, and I go into the property. I buy the investment knowing the kind of tenants I'm going to get, and I set those standards there, knowing the kind of property I'm going to get. But again, there's some that I will not negotiate on, and there's some that I might have a conversation about. If you can't find renters, again, I think the easiest way to do it is 2 ways, right? Increase your marketing. Find more ways. Get on Craigslist and advertise every single day, or perhaps get more ads in the newspaper. Put up more signs. Maybe go to those little arrow signs that you can go put down at all the street corners and say rental, for rent that way. Those tend to work pretty well. Or just lower the price. I mean, if you're having a hard time getting a property rented, you're probably asking too much. And so those are some ways that you can get it without lowering your standards. You could try to get good tenants. And then finally, offer a good product. The rental amount matters a lot, but what matters more to a lot of tenants is the condition of the property. So if you're having trouble renting your property, also take a look at it and just say, is it really rent ready? Is it comparable to the other ones? Is it better than the other ones in the neighborhood? Is there something I can do? Can I do a little more cleaning? Can I make the front look a little better? Can I paint the front of the house or the front door, add a little bit of bark mulch? Whatever I can do to try to improve it so that way it stands out a little bit nicer. Again, tenants will be willing to pay a little bit more if the property demands that because of the quality. So anyway, hopefully that helps you guys today. Before we get out of here, let's do today's success quote, and that comes from good old Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, "You stop growing when you stop learning." And that's definitely not something that applies to any of you because you're all here listening, watching, whatever, listening and learning and growing. And so congratulations on that. Give yourselves a pat on the back. All right, and before we get out of here, I want to leave you with the same lesson or the same tip I give you every single time. In pursuit of your dreams, don't just learn, but actually take action. For the Ask BP podcast, this is Brandon signing off.
You've just heard another episode of the Bigger Pockets Ask BP podcast. Submit your question today on Facebook, Twitter, or the Bigger Pockets forum by using hashtag AskBP. And for more incredible real estate investing tools and education, including a free download of our book, The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing, head over to biggerpockets.com and sign up for your free account today. We'll see you on the next show.